All right, so I had you guys look at the 2003 Form B progressive DBQ. How'd you look at this DBQ for a reason? This is a chestnut I keep coming back to every year because I keep thinking one of these years, they're going to have to ask a progressivism DBQ. The last time they asked a progressivism DBQ as the primary DBQ was in the 1980s. And the only other time you saw progressivism as a DBQ was as the 2003 Form B. So while everybody was doing the New Deal in 2003, the people who were doing the makeup test were doing progressivism. Now, considering the fact that last year's DBQ came from the antebellum period, and the year before that came from the Gilded Age, and the year before that came from Nixon, and the year before that came from the Puritans, the one area that they really haven't covered at all is the early 20th century. So, if I were a betting man, I would put my money on a DBQ coming from the first 30 to 40 years of the 20th century. And since they've already done the New Deal, what are we talking? We're talking imperialism, we're talking progressives, we're talking World War I. Maybe the 1920s. Those are my guesses. I'm right. Well, counting last year, I'm right 60% of the time when it comes to predicting the DBQ area. Not saying the exact question, but predicting the time frame. Okay, so I'm putting my money on the fact that it's going to come from the early 20th century, which is why I'm spending a little bit more time on this material, okay, rather than breezing through it. All right, so, folks, I never like reinventing the wheel, and if you go onto the APCentralCollegeBoard.com website and you go to AP Courses and Exams and go to Exam Information, you'll come to a page that looks like this. History and Social Sciences, go to AP US History. 2003, Form B. There it is. There's the question. Along with scoring comment. Up a little bit. There we go. Scoring commentary. So basically, oh yeah. So they have samples of this DBQ, written samples of this DBQ. They give you a 3, they give you a 5, they give you a 9. If you are so inclined, I would recommend going and reading what a 3 looks like, reading what a 5 looks like, and reading what a 9 looks like. Then these are the scoring guidelines. What is it? There we go. This is what they're looking for. Okay, here's the rubric, which is essentially, there we are, which is essentially a variation of the standard rubric just specifically written for the progressive DBQ. It's got to evaluate successes and limitations. It's got to have several factors, analyzing several factors that contributed to the level of success seen. It's got to use a substantial number of documents. It's got to have substantial and relevant outside information. That's stuff that you remember. If I were writing a DBQ, the first thing I would do is I would figure out how would I answer it as if I had no documents. Ignore the documents. Plan out an answer without documents. Then analyze the documents and figure out where you can plug documents in as additional support. So anyway, you scroll past that to the next page. Uh-oh. How did we get all the way down there? Oh, all right. So, all right, so there's all the stuff that they were kind of looking for, document information and inferences, outside information for the DBQ, everything from the trust busting, Northern Securities, New Nationalism, New Freedom, Standard Oil, Hepburn Act, Federal Reserve Act, Adams Act. I do remember going over pretty much all of these things. There are some things on there that I have not gone over. Again, I can't hit everything. John Dewey, Roosevelt's response to the jungle, Hull House, Triangle Shirtwaist, 17th Amendment, Progressive Party. So there's a lot of stuff there that you could reference. And then they go through and they tell you what you got from each document, what were some inferences you could derive from those documents. So let's take a look at document A. Teddy Roosevelt with the Bears. Take a look. Open it up, take a look. What does the document specifically reveal? It shows Roosevelt attacking bad trusts and restraining good trusts. That leash of restraint. What is a word that we could use to substitute for that leash of restraint? What does that leash of restraint represent? Regulation. Government regulation. So Roosevelt destroying bad trusts but regulating good trusts. The inferences that you can get from this. Now, this is by all means not all the inferences you can get from it, but College boards seem to believe that people, could determine the difference between good trust and bad trust, that the federal government's role is to police corporations, that good trusts are not a fundamental threat to society, that to secure the public good, government must be more powerful than private corporations. And that's definitely something that Roosevelt believed. Did anybody have anything else for document A that they thought was valuable or interesting? Or did pretty much everybody get the idea that Roosevelt was regulating trusts? Anybody not get that? Because all we're asking for is you to get one thing, whether it's information or an inference. Okay? They're not expecting you to write an entire paragraph about one document. Okay? The document reveals evidence to you, whether specifically what's written in the document or inferences, guesses that you can make about the document. And you use those pieces of information to reinforce your belief about what the successes and limitations of progressives were. All right, when you looked at the Neil Reynolds report, what did you get from it? Go ahead.
Reports such as this and the jungle led to a national response with the creation of the FDA and Pure Food Act.
Absolutely, and I love that you included the jungle, because when you read the Neil Reynolds report, that's the first thing I think of is the jungle. So it helps bring in a piece of outside information, so it checks that box. And you bring up the inspiring the formation of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, through the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. Okay? Which definitely represents a success. The federal government. Okay? And by the way, folks, it's Neil and Reynolds. People in the past have made it Neil Reynolds, as if Neil Reynolds was a guy. Neil Reynolds' report is the congressional investigation. into the meat packing industry, inspired by the jungle. So it documents the awful conditions in meat packing. That's what's in the document. Workers are ignorant between the relationship between cleanliness and disease. Some workers have tuberculosis. Inferences from this: there are few regulations that cover the meatpacking industry. Industrial working conditions are poor. Buildings not designed with good working conditions in mind. Okay? By all means, that is not everything you can get from it, but just some things. All right. Document C, Jane Addams. What did you get? What did you get from Jane Addams? Document C. Quick, look down and read it. Pray that I don't call on you. Go ahead. Okay, so what's that mean? Thank you. There you go. Boom. Exactly. She's advocating for an end to child labor and promotion of compulsory education. Put it in fancy terms. Absolutely. If you wrote settlement houses, you didn't read the document. Although Jane Addams does inspire settlement houses, the document itself is not about settlement houses. Jane Addams was about way more than settlement houses. Hull House was just one thing. She was an advocate for child labor laws. She was also a pacifist who argued against World War I. Yeah, and women's suffrage.
She brought attention to a lot of the social problems at the local level, such as the poverty and child labor.
That is true, yes. I mean, she saw it firsthand. That's why she became a national advocate. She saw it firsthand through Hull House. Absolutely. Okay? So, Jane Addams. There we go. Children in factories. Educators seem to be ignorant about industrial work harming children. State laws on child labor seem to be were inadequate. Many children spend only a short time in school. Education should address actual needs created by the socioeconomic system. There you go. All right. Document D. Roosevelt's New Nationalism speech, 1912. Now, guys, you're analyzing the document. You're looking at who the author is, Teddy Roosevelt. We know who Teddy Roosevelt was. You're looking at the time and the place. It's 1912. So what's happening in 1912? Go. No. What's he doing in 1912? Redeem yourself.
Running against Taft and Wilson.
Exactly. He has formed his own third party and is running as a third-party candidate against Taft and Wilson. So here he is expressing his brand of progressivism. And what is it that he seems to latch on to here as being necessary? Yeah.
A variation of the Wisconsin plan.
He is definitely tapping into the Wisconsin plan. He has been inspired by, when you hear Wisconsin plan, there should be a name that pops into your head. Robert La Follette. Absolutely. And what is it that Roosevelt is arguing for specifically in this document, Brian?
Direct election of senators.
Direct election of senators as a way of circumventing the political machines in the states. Now, this is 1912. Do you get direct election of senators? Honest to God, really? The 17th Amendment to the Constitution allows for the direct election of senators in 1913. So obviously, it's successful. Now, is Roosevelt successful? First of all, Roosevelt overall successful in 1912? No, he doesn't win. Wilson wins. Okay? Is he successful at getting the entire Wisconsin plan that Lafayette advocated imprinted on the national level? Initiative, referendum, recall, all that stuff. Does he get that at the national level for all states? No. But he is successful at being an advocate for the direct election of senators. So you got need for political reform, need for direct presidential primaries. Guys, you don't get presidential primaries until the 1960s. Direct election of senators, you get. He even argues that the Electoral College is not adequately democratic. He's arguing for reforming the Electoral College system. Because you've got people winning the presidency who haven't won the popular vote. That's happened 4 times in American history. The most recent being 2000. That's right. You don't have President Albert Arnold Gore Jr., even though he won 500,000 more votes than George Walker Bush. So you've got eventual passage of the 17th Amendment. There you go. All right. Document E, Clayton Antitrust Act. What'd you get from it? Allison, you cannot have been the only person to have done this assignment. Brian.
It outlawed monopolies and legalized unions.
All right, no, wait a minute, though. I thought we already had a Sherman Antitrust Act that outlawed illegal combinations. So what does the Clayton Antitrust Act do? I double dog dare you to form a monopoly. Go ahead, Pat.
It eliminated trade monopolies and used child labor.
Does it? Sure about that? It does make the Federal Trade Commission, and that's a nice little piece of outside information there. That's a government watchdog. That's like a government police agency. Yeah.
It actually does what it's supposed to instead of doing the opposite.
Exactly. Yes. It refines the Sherman Antitrust Act. What had the Sherman, up until the early 1900s, what had the Sherman Antitrust Act been used to break up? Labor unions. So what the Clayton Antitrust Act does is it says labor unions are not to be broken up. So if I'm a member of a labor union, starting with the Wilson administration, which side is my bread buttered on? The Republicans or the Democrats? What is Wilson? A Democrat. He gets the Clayton Antitrust Act passed, which protects labor unions. So labor unions are going to go along with the Democrats. There you go. And that's where they've been for the past 100 years. Okay? So you've got labor is not a commodity. Antitrust laws don't apply to labor unions. That's the big thing. Antitrust laws don't apply to labor unions. Monopolies are unacceptable and illegal. It kind of goes along with the idea of Wilson's new freedom. And then Sherman Antitrust strengthened, reinforced, altered, changed, amended. Labor unions gaining influence. All right, document F, Herbert Crowley. What'd you get from document F, Herbert Crowley? And this, guys, in every one, remember I've told you in the past how the document-based question is structured? There's always a great first document that kind of inspires a ton of things. The first document always inspires a ton of material. Then you get into documents that are kind of paired, like B and C talk to one another, D and E talk to one another, E and, the documents start to talk to one another. There's always one document that is, for lack of a better term, what I call the screwball document. The document where you look at it and go, what the hell does this mean? What is this driving at? This Herbert Crowley document is that document. It is the screwball document. It is the document where if the average student were writing this DBQ, I would tell them, ignore it. You do not have to do or use every document in an APUS DBQ. Do not have to use every document. This would be the one to ignore. However, let's see if we can glean anything about Herbert Crowley from this document. What is it that Crowley's saying in this document? Kramer.
He believes that Roosevelt's attempt at regulating, using government legislation to regulate him.
Yes. He says Wilson is inadequate to the task. He is extremely critical of Woodrow Wilson. But wait a minute. If I go back in my notes and I look at that whole long list of stuff that Wilson got passed in his first term, Federal Reserve Act, the Adamson Act regulating railroad hours, the Workmen's Compensation Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act to break up monopolies but protect labor unions, the Keating-Owen Child Labor Act. What else was passed in there? Well, you had the amendment to the direct election of senators. To me, when I look at Wilson's first term, I see a lot of legislative success, specifically to the point of regulating businesses, business and labor. So why do you think Crowley is so hard on Wilson? It doesn't say it. This would be an inference, but that would be a question I would ask. Why is Crowley being such a dork when it comes to Wilson? Yeah.
Wilson, since he doesn't have a clear idea of what's going on, he's just passing laws to attempt to solve the problem.
Okay, so what should he? Okay, fine. So what is it that you think Crowley thinks Wilson should be addressing that he's not addressing? He's addressing big business. He's addressing labor. He's addressing child labor. He's addressing, a ton of stuff in the business community. What is it that Crowley believes he's not addressing?
Social issues,
Like what?
poverty in cities.
Absolutely. I would agree. I think that Crowley thinks that Wilson is just focused on business and not on the other underlying problems in society, like social problems, like urban problems, like political machines. Wilson didn't touch political machines at all. And Crowley thinks that a lot of these political machines are inherently corrupt. What is something we know about Herbert Crowley? And I made a point of telling you that there was a relationship between Herbert Crowley and somebody else we've talked about. Somebody very famous.
Well, I remember in the document we read, he was talking about how the government needed to restore faith, or the people were losing faith in the government.
They were. Absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely right. Crowley makes the argument in Promise of the American Life that people are losing faith in the institutions out there, whether they're the business institutions, the social institutions, or the political institutions. Absolutely. I agree. I told you, though, that Crowley was a specific influence on one particular person.
Roosevelt.
Yes. Crowley and Roosevelt were like that. So what is driving Crowley? Go.
The fact that Teddy Roosevelt didn't win against Wilson.
Bingo.
Taft.
That's it. There you go. Now, that took a lot of analysis, and I would not expect anybody, maybe one or two people, to get that. All right? But I think Crowley is driven by the fact that Roosevelt lost in 1912, and this is just sour grapes. But that's what I get from this document. Crowley's a sore loser. Crowley had backed the wrong horse in 1912. All right. Yeah, so, claims too much. Wilson is inadequate for the reforms needed, discontented with Wilson's new freedom. There's a need for greater change, perhaps more systemic change, social change, political change. All right. Hammer versus Dagenhart was easy. Yeah. Which child labor law? Keating-Owen. It overturns Keating-Owen. So it allows you to bring in Keating-Owen. Even though it doesn't say Keating-Owen, it allows you to bring Keating-Owen in. And somebody reading that answer says, oh, well, Hammer versus Dagenhart represents a limitation on the part of progressives because it overturned what was considered to be progress in the form of the Keating-Owen Child Labor Act. Oh, yeah. Document G, that's an easy one to use. Absolutely. Supreme Court does not reflect progressive reform. Some parents want their children to work in factories and mills. Yeah, because they're bringing money in. Document I. Or H. I know how to get it. All right, another picture. All right. Document H. Kaiser Wilson. Go ahead.
I thought that women thought they should have a voice in like the government that rules them.
When you look at that document, what's it make you think of? Women's suffrage. Absolutely. When do you get women's suffrage? 1920. The 19th Amendment. Look at the date of the picture. What date is it?
1918.
1918. So what's happening in 1918 with the United States and the fact that she calls Wilson Kaiser? He's not a role. That's Germany. What's happening? What? Absolutely, Kramer. You nailed it. That is exactly what that picture is about. This woman here, who I believe is Alice Paul, is calling out the hypocrisy of the Wilson administration claiming to want to bring democracy to the rest of the world, make the world safe for democracy, yet is unwilling to put the full weight of the presidency behind the women's suffrage amendment. You want to bring democracy to the rest of the world, but you don't want to treat your women the same way. Absolutely. Yeah, when I look at document H, I think about Alice Paul, I think about the women's suffragettes. And look, here's the thing. Wilson had gotten the backing of the North American Women's Suffrage Association back in 1912 when he was running, with the promise that he would back a women's suffrage amendment. 1913, 1914, 1915, 1916, he gets reelected. 1917, we go to war. 1918, troops on the ground. There's still no women's suffrage amendment. So you got women saying, hey, dude, we just backed you in 2 elections. What gives? Where's the support? Where's the love? And it's not going to be until 1920 that the Wilson administration, actually end of 1919, that the Wilson administration says, yeah, fine, give women the right to vote. So Wilson was slow pedaling on it. All right. Document I, W.E.B. Du Bois, the crisis. To which I would then ask myself, what's the crisis? Go.
Civil rights aren't being enforced.
Civil rights aren't being enforced. So what does document I make you think about? When you see W.E.B. Du Bois' name, there should be outside information you should think about. NAACP, Niagara Movement, absolutely. Immediate political rights, yeah.
Education for blacks.
Education for blacks, talented 10%, all that stuff. Guys, when you are reviewing, like I gave you that review material, when you're reviewing and you look at each one of those terms there, you look at that term and your mind should bubble with about 3 or 4 things, at least. When I see W.E.B. Du Bois, my mind bubbles with things. NAACP, Niagara Movement, Education of Blacks, talented 10%. Okay? All right. So, document I represents success or failure.
Failure.
Limitation, yes, put it mildly. All right, and then document J. Document J. It's an interesting document. It's a graph. It's a bar graph showing voter participation. What do you learn from that document? Yeah.
The women didn't even vote.
You gave women the right to vote. Nobody turned out. So what does that tell you about progressivism in 1920?
It's dying.
It's dying. Absolutely. Document J reveals the death of progressivism. Decline in percentage of eligible voters, sharp decline in presidential voting between 1916 and 1920. 19th Amendment may be less significant than proponents suggested, or it may be that eligible women voters did not bother to vote. I tend to think it's because progressivism is kind of dying out as a political movement by 1920. People have had enough of the government getting in their business. So when Warren G. Harding comes along in 1920 and advocates rejecting the Treaty of Versailles and returning America to what he called normalcy, a return to normalcy. Basically what he's arguing for is a return to the policies of the Gilded Age, hands-off approach. People were like, yeah, we'll buy that. We can buy that. I mean, who the hell is Warren G. Harding? Warren G. Harding, he sucked. He was terrible as president. We're recording all of this stuff. This is good stuff. Let me give you a quote from Warren G. Harding himself. You'll love this.
Not as bad as McKinley, is it?
Well, look, I mean, I have not bought the updated version of this book, so this book goes as far up as Bill Clinton. It doesn't have George W. Bush or Barack Obama. But there are, so Bill Clinton was the 42nd president of the United States. He was the 41st guy to hold the office. Remember, Grover Cleveland was the 22nd and 24th president. Ha ha ha, tricky, tricky. So there are 41 guys in this book. Here's Warren G. Harding's rank. 41! 41. And here's the quote. If only every politician were this honest with himself. Quote, I am not fit for this office and should never have been elected here. Boom! Woo! So, baby, let me tell you something. We've survived Warren Harding. We've survived James Buchanan and the drunk Franklin Pierce. We've survived the inept Ulysses Grant. We've survived the half-asleep Chester Arthur. And a ton of others. We can survive anything. Okay? It's all good. Don't worry about a thing, peeps. Okay? So anyway, there you go. All right, so what was, from the homework, what was a progressive reformer's success at the national level? Go ahead.
Neil Brown's report created the FDA and exposed the repulsive actions of the industry.
Okay, so who is the progressive reformer?
Well,
Okay, there you Upton Sinclair. There you go. Because the Neil Reynolds report is Congress. Congress represents the federal government. So if you are making sure that you're answering the question about progressive reformers and the national government, under national government, you got to put Congress, TR, Taft, and Wilson. That's the federal government. Everybody else represents progressive reformers. Okay? What about a progressive reformer limitation? Yeah.
The Wisconsin plan was not adopted in all states, and the Keatings-Owens Child Labor Act was repealed.
Okay, I was looking for one thing, you gave me two. All right, that's fine. All right, so La Follette doesn't get the Wisconsin plan everywhere. You get it in Wisconsin, you get it in California, limited degree in Oregon, somewhat in New York, a little bit in New Jersey, but not everywhere. Okay? As a matter of fact, there are still some states that have extremely regressive political laws. Did you know that you can't be an atheist and get elected to political office in the state of Maryland?
Huh?
Did you know that?
Not even
Serious. There is a law on the books in the Maryland Constitution that says you must be of a religious faith in order to hold office, and that is true today.
What happened to separation of church and state? Were you going to tell
There are 9 states where that law is on the books.
That's a
Were you going to
lie.
tell us that Maryland history?
Huh?
Were you going to tell us that Maryland history?
Yeah, I'll get to it. All right. I read that, when did I read that? Friday night. And I was like, what?
What if you become an atheist after your life?
Ooh, do you get thrown out of office?
What's it elected?
Huh?
It says elected, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, you can't serve.
Oh.
Can't serve an elected office if you're an atheist.
Then you can just amend it or try to get it amended before you become.
Yeah, good luck getting that amended.
What if you just don't have any religion? You don't tell people?
Well, you have to put it down.
What if you're non-denominational?
Non-denominational. You can always put non. You can always lie, Day. You can always lie to your constituents. Sure.
It's not lying. It's not
That's a good one. I like that.
Very good. You're understanding adulthood. All right. It's like my son. He feels the need to be like honest all the time, and I'm like, dude, buddy, you gotta pick and choose where you're honest. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you honestly tell me everything that goes on, but I mean, really, you gotta learn how to, keep things to yourself. How about a federal government success at the national level? Yeah. Trust busting. Yeah, they're really good at trust busting. I'll tell you what, that's something that the federal government's really good at. Business regulation. How about a limitation at the national level? Yeah.
Child Labor Act.
Yeah, Child Labor Act. You experience a setback there with the Hammer versus Dagenhart repeal. Yeah.
Civil rights. No.
Civil rights, absolutely. I mean, you can't go wrong with a paragraph on civil rights being a limitation in the progressive era. I mean, I'm telling you, progressives didn't touch civil rights with a 10-meter cattle prod. Wilson, quite the racist. Yes, and I will show you the slide. We will get there. All right, if you could do me a favor, now please follow along here. I want you to make sure that your name and 1B are on the front here, but then I also want you to open it up and put your name and 1B on the first page of the DBQ. So your name should be on page 1, and your name should be on page 2. Then, I want you to rip the front page off and pass both of them up. Two piles. That's it. 2 piles. Pile of DBQs and a pile of answers.
They are.
Oh.
Thank you, my friend.
Do you? Do you know what's going on? Are you able to glean? Are you able to figure it out? What do you think's going on, Mr. Rodriguez?
I think that DDQ might be used fairly soon.
Fairly soon?
Yeah, Michael.
I believe it might.
Maybe on the Unit
I
9
believe you
test.
might be on to something.
Maybe the Unit 9 test.
Perhaps. It'll be over here. Under 1B. All right. One of these years, man, they gotta ask this question. Gotta ask it. It's such a big thing that they have not asked. They have to. All right. Let's take a look at World War I. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I'm with you.
World War I from the U.S. perspective. Now, Mr. Ebley probably told you last year that when we got to this point, I would say, you got this in Mr. Ebley's class. You got World War I in Mr. Ebley's class. Okay? So we are not going to do all the World War I-y type stuff. All right? However,
What about the Brace class?
Mr. Brace, I don't know about that. Did you get it? I don't know. You tell me. All right, so for those of you who are, well, I should have really had this up and running here. So for those of you who may not have gotten World War I am going to recount the story of World War I as if World War I were a bar fight.
Yeah, there it is. Let's go.
Oh, if the DBQs on World War I, we're all screwed. All right. So here we go. If World War I was a bar fight. Enjoy. Germany, Austria, and Italy are all standing together in the middle of a pub when Serbia bumps into Austria and spills Austria's beer. Austria demands that Serbia buy it a whole new suit because the new beer stains, because beer got on its trouser leg. Germany expresses its support for Austria's point of view. Britain recommends that everybody cool down. Serbia points out that it cannot afford to buy a whole new suit, but offers to pay for the dry cleaning for the pant leg. Russia and Serbia look at Austria. Austria asks Serbia, who's it looking at? Russia suggests that Austria should leave its little brother alone. Austria inquires as to who's going to assist Russia in doing so. Germany appeals to Britain that France has been looking at it and that it's sufficiently out of order that Britain not intervene. Britain replies that France can look at whoever it wants to look at, and that Britain is looking at Germany too. And what's Germany going to do about it anyway? Germany tells Russia to stop looking at Austria, or Germany will render Russia incapable of such action anymore. Britain and France ask Germany whether it's looking at Belgium. Turkey and Germany go off into the corner and whisper. When they come back, Turkey makes a show of not looking at anyone. Germany rolls up its sleeves and looks at France and then punches Belgium.
Yeah.
France and Britain punch Germany. Austria punches Russia. Germany punches Britain and France with one hand and punches Russia with the other hand. Russia throws a punch at Germany but misses and nearly falls over. Japan calls to Britain from the other side of the room and says it's on Britain's side, but remains on the other side of the room. Italy surprises everybody by punching Austria. Australia punches Turkey and then gets punched back. But there are no hard feelings because Britain made Australia do it. France gets thrown through a plate glass window, but gets back up and carries on fighting. Russia gets thrown through another plate glass window, gets knocked out, suffers brain damage, and wakes up with a complete personality change. Italy throws a punch at Austria, misses, but Austria falls over anyway. Italy raises both fists in the air and runs around the room as if it just knocked out Austria. America waits until Germany is about to fall over from sustained punching from Britain and France, walks over to Germany, smashes it in the head with a bar stool, and then pretends it won the whole fight by itself. By now, all the chairs are broken and the big mirror over the bar is shattered. Britain, France, and America agree that Germany threw the first punch, so the whole thing is Germany's fault. And while Germany is lying still unconscious, Britain, France, and America go through its pockets, steal its wallet, and buy drinks for all their friends.
Man, these people.
There you go.
God, they are hammered.
There you go. So, all right. So the United States.
Do a reenactment of that, Mr. Smith.
You like that? That's pretty good, eh? So with regard to World War I, for the bulk of World War I, the United States is not involved. It is not America's problem. You've got a war going on for 3 years, and America is not involved.
Damn.
The battleground is pretty much in Europe, although it is a worldwide conflagration. But what the United States is doing is it's trying to conduct business as usual and sell to both sides, hoping that both sides honor American neutrality. All right, so America has declared in 1914, when the war starts in August, that it is remaining neutral and is going to try to sell to both sides. I think we've seen this chestnut play out before, where America, is caught in the middle between Britain and France during the Napoleonic Wars, and both sides wind up attacking America. You're going to see the same basic thing here. In 1914, America's got bigger fish to fry. The foreign policy priority for Wilson. What is the foreign policy priority for Wilson? We talked about moral diplomacy. Where does Wilson have America engaged? Not yet. Yes. 1914 to 1917, America is otherwise engaged trying to chase down Pancho Villa in Mexico. We've got the American Army chasing Villa throughout northern Mexico. That is where America is primarily engaged, foreign policy-wise. Here in the Western Hemisphere, trying to go after the bad guy, Pancho Villa. But there are going to be things that take place that bring America into World War I, and it starts with German actions. Germany is attacking passenger liners, like the Lusitania. Now, the attack on the Lusitania takes place in 1915. Okay? Why is Germany attacking passenger liners? To kill the passengers? Does anybody know why?
They think they were smuggling things?
Yeah, the British were smuggling war supplies aboard their passenger liners, and the Germans knew it. And they warned Britain not to do it because that would make the passenger liners targets. And the British did it anyway and never told the passengers. So ships like the Lusitania got sunk. And when the Lusitania got sunk, the British, stoked anti-German sentiment worldwide, called the Germans barbarians. How dare the Germans attack innocent passengers? And there were 100 and some Americans killed on board, and the British were more than happy to play that up in the American newspapers. So Britain is doing a lot, 1915, 1916, 1917, to get Americans to side with the British against the Germans. The British would love nothing more than to get the United States on the side of Britain and France with America's industrial power and its manpower. Wilson does not like the fact that Germany has attacked passenger liners. He sees that as evil. And we know how Wilson feels about evil. But he's not prepared to get America involved in the war. And the Lusitania, by the way, is not the only ship sunk. There are a number of other ships sunk. Most notably, a ship called the Sussex, another one called the Arabic, and these were two other ships where Americans were killed. Wilson gets Germany to promise not to attack innocent passenger liners and cargo ships. It's called the Sussex Arabic Pledge. Wilson wants Germany to honor America's neutrality. And Wilson says, look, if you start attacking passenger liners and cargo ships and violate our neutrality, we will have no choice but to declare war on you. And Germany does not want America in this war. Germany is fighting Britain and France on one front, Russia on another front. They're fighting a two-front war in Europe. So they don't want the Americans involved here. And Wilson could claim, rightfully so, in 1916 when he's running for re-election, re-elect me. Look at all the good stuff I got you in the new freedom legislation, and I've kept you out of war. And so that's what Wilson runs on for re-election in 1916. He kept us out of war. Despite the fact that he kept us out of war and got a buttload of progressive legislation passed, it's still a close election. As you can see here, Charles Evans Hughes, best known as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, one of 16 guys to serve as Chief Justice. Now, Wilson gets reelected in November 1916. He's going to be inaugurated for his second term March 4th, 1917. In January of 1917, the Germans make an announcement that they are going to violate the Sussex Arabic Pledge and resume unrestricted submarine warfare. The problem is that the British and French are receiving supplies, but the British blockade of German ports is keeping supplies out of Germany. Germany's running out of supplies. So it is desperate to stop supplies from getting to Britain and France. Hence, they're going to resume unrestricted submarine warfare. Now, the Germans know that this will cheese off the Americans. So, in order to keep the Americans occupied, what did the Germans do to try to offset this? Yeah. They try to get Mexico at least on Germany's side through what's known as the Zimmerman Note or the Zimmerman Telegram. This is a proposal for a German-Mexican alliance, basically saying, when we resume unrestricted submarine warfare, we know the Americans are going to declare war on us, so if Mexico will join Germany, maybe Mexico can keep America occupied to keep America from sending troops to Europe. Does that make sense? With the promise that if Germany and Mexico are successful, Mexico will get back Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, which it had lost during the Mexican-American War during the Polk administration. Now, this is sent over a private cable from Germany to Mexico. So how the hell did the Americans find out about it? Who tapped the wire? Not America.
British.
British, absolutely. And when the British find out about this, they are more than happy to provide multiple copies to all the newspapers in the United States because they know that this will turn public opinion in America against Germany. And it does. Wilson feels that we have no choice but to declare war on Germany. But take a look at these lines here from Wilson's war declaration. Okay? What do you see here? It is a fearful thing to lead this great peaceful people into war, into the most terrible and disastrous of all wars. Civilization itself seeming to be in the balance. But the right is more precious than peace. And we shall fight for the things which we have always carried nearest our hearts, for democracy, for the right of those who submit to authority to have a voice in their own governments, for the rights and liberties of small nations, for a universal dominion of right, by such a concert of free peoples as shall bring peace and safety to all nations, and make the world itself at last free.
27, the morning announcement will be on shortly.
What do you get from that? What does it make you think about?
He's trying to rally them behind resolving the war and making it peaceful.
Okay?
Instead of being like hostile, it's really emotional.
He is appealing to emotion. He's looking at the glass as half full, I would say. And I think he's seeing this war as an opportunity. To do what?
Spread democracy.
To what?
Spread democracy.
Isn't that what progressivism is all about?
Yeah.
But now we're taking progressivism as an idea at home and we're applying it to the world. We're going to spread democracy to the world and fight a war so that we don't have to fight wars in the future. I see also morality in here. Talk about Wilson being a moral diplomacy guy. There's morality in here. We are on the side of civilization. And we're going to fight for what is right. Freedom, democracy. Make the world safe for democracy. That is going to be our goal. So we're almost on a freedom crusade.
Monday, March 10th, the V-Day. Please stand for your pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Mock trial law dogs. This is a reminder that we have one final trial on Wednesday, March 12th. The plaintiff team goes against Sabrina Park.
Submit your artwork to Southern's Literary Magazine. Begin any creative writing piece and or amazing artwork to Miss Van Sickler F201 ASAP. Get your work in our yearly publication.
Brookhaven meeting on Friday during Bulldog Walk in C201. Want to be a part of something grand? Are you an out-of-the-box creative who wants to change the world? Do you love art and agriculture? Come be a part of a design team and help write a course for our
So when we come back next time, we'll look at how the United States mobilizes for war, what they enact, how the war is won, and what Wilson's vision is for the post-war world and why it does not succeed.
Donors.